Don Brewer from Grand Funk tells us the interesting true story behind that drumming in Bob Seger's Hollywood Nights, because he played with Bob Seger, of course, on Rock History Music. As a former drummer and the father of a very serious drummer at 14 years old, my son drums all the time, he's very serious. I know all about listening to a track and trying to figure out what that drummer, the original drummer, was doing. I never read notation, so it made it a lot harder. I really had to listen to what a drummer was doing. And sometimes you really need both notation, the written music, and the ear, if you've got a good ear, to figure out what they're doing. Don Brewer of Grand Funk started playing with Bob Seger in the 80s. David Teegarden was the original drummer on Hollywood Nights. When Don Brewer was learning that song, you had to step back and say, wait a minute, something else is going on here.
We did a lot of tours with them back in the 80s and then going into the 2000s and stuff. And they've got, Bob's got a song, Hollywood Nights. I don't know if you know the song. I'm sure you know the song. Yeah. And, when I first was learning the song, I'm going, what in the world is the drummer doing? What is it? And I finally figured out there's two drummers. They overdubbed a second drum track on it, and so it's like that's what it is. That you got the hi-hat doing this, the snare drum doing this, you got the bass figure doing that, but there's two of everything. And that's why, I copped it. I do my own thing on it, and it works. I finally asked Bob, I said, did you guys overdub it? Well, yeah, we overdubbed another drummer. Well, how do you expect me, one guy, to do both parts at the same time?
How far did you go back with Bob Seger?
Well, I would, going back probably to our early teens. He used to play a place, and we used to play a place called Mount Holly. It was like a sock hop place. A local DJ on WTAC would go. Every Friday and Saturday night, he'd have, he'd invite all the kids out, and all of the local bands would play there. And Bob Seger and the Last Herd was one of the bands that would play. And I had a band called the Jazz Masters, and that became the Pack, and Terry Knight and the Pack, and we used to play. And that's where we met each other, really. And I met all of those guys, way back then. And then it was quite a number of years, later, that after Grand Funk had been through its thing, and then all of a sudden Bob made it. And he was huge in the 80s, and I wasn't doing anything. And so I got a call from our former keyboard player for Grand Funk, Craig Frost. And Craig had gone with Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, and they had lost their drummer, and they were looking for a new drummer. And he called me, and I went up there and and played with those guys for a couple of days, and that's how I got into that thing. And I toured with those guys on and off for 40 some years.
Mark Farner sang most of the hits for Grand Funk, wrote them, and played guitar, lead guitar, or keyboards on a lot of them. But Don Brewer also sang We're an American Band and Shinin' On, a singing drummer. I asked him if he was always behind the kit singing.
Yeah, ever since I started playing drums, I was always one of the singers. In my very first band, that I started in that basement that I was telling you about in Swartz Creek, Michigan, the Jazz Masters, I was one of the singers. I would sing some of the Beatles songs, I would sing some of the Chuck Berry songs, and I would actually stand behind the drums with a microphone between my legs, and I would sing. As well as backup, So when I was learning to play the drums as a drum kit, being a rock and roll musician, I was also a singer. So I really never had to think about it. I think if I would have learned to play the drums first and play them for a number of years, and then all of a sudden somebody said, hey, why don't you sing too? I don't think I would have been able to do it, but it was because I learned both at the same time. It kind of comes second nature, that it's just what you do. Yeah. Don
Brewer's been playing in front of people since the mid 60s. I asked him about faux pas, accidents that happen on stage.
Well, one of the big ones, and I'm always after my drum tech about this, is the bass drum head. And if you break a bass drum head, it stops the show. There's probably not anything else in a rock and roll show that'll stop the show other than a broken bass drum head. And it really didn't break because the head needed to be changed. It's the beater came off of the stem. And the stem is just a sharp piece of metal, and it just sliced a hole right through. So it was in the middle of a show in an arena with probably 10 to 12,000 people out there, and you have to stop and change the bass drum head.
Wow.
We'll have more of our conversation with Don Brewer and Mark Farner of Grand Funk coming up next week. Make sure you comment on our videos, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos. If you want to be a volunteer on Rock History Music, make sure you write it in the comments of this video. We'll get back to you. We're looking for researchers and writers and people who could be guests on this program talking about good old rock and roll. And thanks to all the folks who are going onto our merchandising page and buying our t-shirts, our mugs, and our sweatshirts. It helps us buy new equipment. Partial proceeds going to St. Jude's Hospital. I'm John Bowden from Rock History Music.